Good evening. It is 6:01 p.m. and I'll call this meeting to order. Start with the reading of the introduction. So welcome to the Planning and Heritage Advisory Committee meeting for March 13th, 2025. The reading of the land acknowledgement. West Hants Regional Municipality acknowledges that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and that this land is governed by the treaties of peace and friendship signed in 1726. West Hants Regional Municipality recognizes that we are all treaty people and have responsibilities to this land and each other. West Hants Regional Municipality also recognizes African Nova Scotians are a distinct people whose history, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kma'ki known as Nova Scotia for over 400 years. Council and I, as chair, are committed to ensuring this meeting and its participants conduct themselves in a respectful and professional manner as outlined in the municipality's code of conduct. Meeting presenters, staff, and members of the public are expected to always conduct themselves in an equally respectful manner while the meeting is being conducted. I thank you all in advance for your commitment to these important meeting principles. Members are reminded to use microphones if they wish to speak. Push the button, the red light comes on. Just a reminder that to everyone that we are live on YouTube and that the meeting is being recorded. Audience members are not permitted to record the meeting on their personal devices. If we need to leave the building due to a fire or other emergencies, exits are found to the left, to the right, towards the back of the room. The muster location is in the staff parking lot. I will be the last person to leave the building, and I'll check to make sure the washrooms are empty in the event of an emergency. In the spirit of efficiently running the meeting, and given the number of applications on the agenda, we have a full plate tonight. I want to remind the committee that staff will present the application and accept questions. And once the motion is on the floor, the committee is welcome and encouraged to debate amongst itself without further input from staff. I guess now we would do the attendance.
Mayor Zabian,
Present.
Councillor Leary Pinch,
Present.
Councillor Ivy.
Present.
We have regrets from Tim Carr, Jane Davis.
Present.
We have regrets from Paul Beasley, Guido Ferlani,
Present.
KJ Conyers Steve,
Present.
Michelle Bourgeois,
Present.
Mark Keogh.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Okay, on to announcements. Are there any announcements? Okay, Guido.
Okay. Chair, you will let me know when is appropriate to make addition to the agenda tonight, to request to addition.
Yeah, that would be the next thing on the agenda after we, if anybody has any announcements. Mark?
Yeah, I just want to let any of the parents in our area in Upper Vaughan know that the Upper Vaughan Community Hall is having a dance party this Saturday from 6 to 8, and it's for children in grades primary to grade 5. And it's free entry and treat bags are provided. So if you've got some little ones looking for something to do, bring them over to the hall for a dance party.
If there's no further announcements, can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Addition.
Jane?
I have an addition.
An addition? Okay.
I'd like to add under 8.0, business arising from the minutes, the category committee Q&A. And when we get to that point, I can explain what I mean by that. If we're getting late in the meeting by the time we get to that point in the agenda, I can defer it to the next meeting. So I don't want to keep everyone here too late.
So would I be looking for a seconder for that addition?
Seconded.
You know?
I have another addition.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. One addition is very simple and most trivial. I would like to move to change slightly the name of the committee to make it more precise to what it is and the acronym of it. I will explain later. And the other is less pressing, but I would love to add it at the end in the tail because tonight the agenda is ridiculous. And I would like to, in the pack, discuss the cell phone towers and the impact they have and the many multiple aspects that we need to become as a population become aware of. And so it is not an urgent, but is already operating in one of our district 2, I think. And one additional thing, I would like to know what time we finish tonight, because the agenda is quite extensive. And if it's possible, have a discussion for finishing around 9 and not beyond that. And anything that goes beyond that, we can discuss the next month. We know that the agenda is ridiculous tonight because we didn't have a meeting in January for obvious reasons. So I like that to be considered, given that we are volunteer and tomorrow is a working day for many of us. Thank you.
Just for my own clarity and anybody who would be seconding that, we're looking to amend the name of the committee or have a discussion around that. Discussion about cell phone towers and discussion around a 9 p.m. finish to the meeting. So, does that pretty much summarize what you're?
Perfectly.
Okay. Would there be any seconder on that, Jane? Mayor, Councillor Ivey?
Thank you, Chair. My notation is just an amendment to the agenda, the items 8.6 and 8.7. Within the actual agenda, 8.7 in the body is item number 8.6, and 8.6 does not appear to be there as an update. I'm not sure if that's because we already closed it off. I didn't get to go back and check that, but I just wanted to note that in the body, 8.7 is identified as 8.6, and 8.6 is not there unless I missed it. So I think that's something that we should update so that anybody publicly going through later is not looking for something that isn't there and is able to find what they expect. I'm sorry for the late notice. I just picked that up this afternoon. So.
Would I need a seconder for that motion?
Second.
And Mayor Zabian?
Yeah, through you, Chair. I'm just unsure of the addition of time ending at 9. The agenda was set a week ago, and there's business that needs to be concluded. So I'm not sure if it's a discussion on ending meetings at 9 or changing the terms of reference to state that. I'm just not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either whether
it's hard to know when you have late addition.
exactly whether
No
it's
substance to them, whether you vote for them or not.
yeah.
It makes it really difficult.
Understood.
May I add, if I may, or it's not relevant? You chair, Danny.
Without getting into debating a motion at this phase, if you have anything you want to just clarify in advance of that discussion.
Oh, sure.
I wouldn't
It
want to get
wasn't
off
a motion.
I wouldn't want to get off the rails too far here.
Yeah, it wasn't a motion. It was a discussion for ending at 9 p.m. Given the amount and given what happened last month and the decision made that I deem proper, that those decisions fall where they need to fall. Thank you.
Are there any, at this time, are there any declarations of conflicts of interest? Oh. So we need to vote on the agenda in favor of, go ahead. You can move it.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second.
Mark? Okay. So the motion is to approve the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Now we'll get into, are there any declarations of conflicts of interest? There being none of those, I'll look for approval of the minutes from January 9th of 2025.
So move, Chair.
Second.
Thank you. Seconded. All those in favor of approving the minutes from January 9th, 2025? All opposed? Motion carried. So I believe that brings us on to new business. First order of new business is file 2425 rezoning of 33 Lakewood Drive, Brooklyn, PID 450178183. And I believe Will Hong has some information on that. I'll pass that over to Will.
Thank you, Chair. All right. Good evening, members of the Planning and Heritage Advisory Committee. Our first file tonight is the rezoning application on 33 Lakewood Drive in Brooklyn. So a completed application was received from Michael Redman on behalf of Diane Saunders on November 5th last year. And the application was to rezone the subject lot from a split zone of highway commercial and 2-unit residential to 2-unit residential entirely in order to subdivide 3 different residential lots after the rezoning request. And this is the ortho photo of the subject property. The property is currently used as a residential dwelling, which is located on the northern side of the property with frontage on Lakewood Drive. And you can see a barn on the eastern side of the property, which is no longer in use. And the property is also surrounded by some other single unit dwellings on the eastern side of the property and also a self-storage facility on the southeastern corner of the subject lot. And this image shows the generalized future land use map of the Windsor Municipal Planning Strategy, which indicates the subject lot properties and the surrounding properties are designated village in this area. And this image refers to the zoning map of the West End land use bylaw, which shows that part of the property is currently zoned 2-unit residential, and another portion of the properties is zoned highway commercial, which is directly on the frontage of Highway 215. And the proposal tonight is to rezone this property entirely to 2-unit residential, so there will no longer have the highway commercial zone in these properties. And so the 2-unit residential zoning, which will permit 2-unit dwellings, mini homes, and also usage permitted in the single-unit residential zone, subject to the single-unit residential zone requirements. And this is a picture taken in the early January this year, which shows the view of the subject lot from the Lakewood Drive. And here is another picture taken from the Highway 215. So the enabling policy for this application is policy 6.2.3, which allows council to consider rezoning land within the village designation to single-unit residential or 2-unit residential. And in summary, the criteria to this policy is met since the subject lot is not conflict with adjacent existing uses. And for our next policy here, we have policy 16.3.1, which includes general criteria for any amendments to the land use bylaw of West End. And in summary, that the criteria are met since the proposal is not considered premature or inappropriate for the area, and no municipal costs related to the proposal are anticipated. And also the fire chief, development officer, the manager of building and fire inspection services, also the area manager of the Nova Scotia Department of Public Works, and also the Public Works Engineering Division of our municipality have no concern, which have not been addressed in my report tonight. So through the planning process, we first held the public information meeting on January 15th, and the meeting was broadcast on the municipal YouTube channel. Approximately 9 members attended the meeting with one individual speaking, and the deadline for comment period was January 29th this year, and staff didn't receive any responses from the public during the commenting period. And however, staff did receive one comment before the comment period, which expressed concerns for safe roadway access on potential new driveway on the Highway 215. So with this concern in mind, staff reached out to the Nova Scotia Public Works Department because they have the jurisdiction on the Highway 215. And in response, they have confirmed that the subject lot has safe roadway access to both the Lakewood Drive and also Highway 215. So as mentioned previously, we did a public information meeting on January 15, and staff further reviewed the application and come up with a recommendation report for tonight's meeting. And move on, this will go to council for the first reading on March 25th this month, and then a public hearing and second reading happening concurrently on April 29th. If the application was approved by council, the notice of approval will be placed in the paper, and that will outline the 14 days appeal period to the Nova Scotia Utility and the Review Board. And this brings my presentation to the end. I have my recommendation on the screen. And with that, thank you everyone for listening, and I can take any question this committee member may have. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Will?
Through you, Chair, very quick, Will. The M1 portion of the old barn, what does M1 stand for? It's an orange color.
Through you, Chair, to the committee member. So the M1 stands for the Resource Industrial Zone. And that is, I believe, that is the self-storage facility. That is not a subject property for tonight's rezoning request.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, again, Will, one clarification. The 3 lots, I believe, HC, are not part of the property and they will stay highly commercial, if I got it right.
Through you, Chair, to the committee member, yes, that is correct.
Okay, if there's no further questions, sorry.
It's not a question. If you could put it back to the recommendation, I'm
Absolutely.
prepared to make the motion.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So that PACAC recommends that council give first reading and hold a public hearing to consider amending Schedule A of the West Hants Land Use Bylaw to rezone PID 450-17183 at 33 Lakewood Drive in Brooklyn from the split zone of 2-unit residential R2 and highway commercial GC zone to the 2-unit residential R2 zone entirely as shown in the report 24 to 25 to the Planning and Heritage Advisory Committee dated March 13th, 2025.
Do I have a seconder for that?
Second.
Councillor Ivey? All right, there's a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, the next order of business we have is file 25-01, rezoning and West Hants land use bylaw amendments for PID 45405-784 College Road, Windsor. And again, back to Will.
Thank you, Chair. And moving on to my next application, and this is about rezoning PID number 4540-5784, and also the amendments to the Windsor Land Use Bylaw. So this shows the author photo of the subject lot. As outlined in the yellow, the lot is currently undeveloped and partially utilized for some agriculture activities. And as you can see, the subject lot has frontage on College Road. It is also directly abutting to the King's Edge Hill school site, which is indicated by the red star. And this is a more recent picture of the site taken in early February, where you can see the existing open field on the site, which has been used for growing pumpkins and hay last year. And in terms of the background of this application, a complete application was received from Brighter Community Planning on behalf of King's Edge Hill School on January 7 this year. And the request was to rezone the subject lot from single unit residential R1 to institutional zone, and also amend the Windsor Land Use Bylaw to allow agrivoltaic system as an accessory use in the institutional zone. And so what exactly is agrivoltaics? And I personally feel like I have learned a lot through this planning process. And it is a very nascent concept. And simply put, it is a dual use of land for solar energy production and agriculture. And here's another picture for reference. As you can see, the solar panels are positioned to allow crops to grow underneath the solar panels. So in considering this rezoning request, Policy 16.1.3 of the Windsor Municipal Planning Strategy enables council to consider to zone any area immediately adjacent to a given land under generalized future land use map to a zone permitted in the adjacent designation. So for example, this slide shows the generalized future land use map, which indicates that the subject property is currently designated residential. However, the property to the east is designated community use, which is the King's Edge Hill School site. So in this case, because the subject lot is immediately adjacent to the King's Edge Hill School, so policy 16.1.3 would apply to this application, which allows council to rezone the subject lot to a zone that is allowed within the community use designation. So in this case, that means that it can be rezoned to institutional. And the other two policy that staff are looking into is policy GP-1 and GP-2, which allow council to regulate accessory uses by specific development standards and allow the accessory use to be located on a lot held in the same ownership and directly abuts from the lot containing the main use it is intended to serve. And so in this case, because the subject lot is also owned by the King's Edge Hill School, and the proposed agrivoltaic system is also intended to serve the school by producing solar energy and also growing their own food. So this policy have also been met. And for the next policy, 16.3.1, that is again the general criteria in consideration of amendments to the land use bylaw of Windsor. And in short, this criteria and in policy has also been met since fire chief, development officer, manager of building and fire inspection services, and also traffic authority and the public works engineering division have no concern with the proposed development. And also no municipal costs related to the proposal are anticipated. So staff are proposing amendments to the Windsor land use bylaw in order for council to allow this type of proposal. So obviously agrivoltaics is something that was never considered before in this municipality. So we need to produce amendments to the both of maps and the text of the Windsor land use bylaw. And specifically, this includes amend the zoning map of the Windsor land use bylaw to change the subject lot from single unit residential R1 to institutional zone, and also amend the text of Windsor land use bylaw to allow agrivoltaic system as an accessory use in the institutional zone, and add a new definition of such use. And this image shows the current zoning map of the Windsor land use bylaw, which indicates that subject lot is currently zoned single unit residential, and the use permitted under the zone is single unit dwellings. And zoning from the surrounding properties include agriculture, 2-unit residential, institutional, and also College Road Comprehensive Development District. And this shows the proposed zoning map, which would be to change the zoning of the subject lot to institutional, which will be the same zone as the King's Edge Hill School site, and also allow a range of institutional uses listed on this slide. And this slide shows the proposed tax amendment. As I've mentioned in my report, agrivoltaics is still something very nascent, and staff are not aware of any similar project currently being built in our province. And so what we did is to look at other places around North America to see how we can learn from other places who have already have this sort of regulation set in place, so we can learn from their best practices and learn from them. So this is what we come up with, and the requirements we put forward would require a site plan to be submitted during the permitting process to identify things like setbacks, landscape buffer along the residential properties, and also total area of solar panels, and etc. And we would need also add a specific definition to the Windsor land use bylaw, and this is how we define it. So an agrivoltaic system means the simultaneous use of land for both renewable energy production through an arrangement of solar photovoltaic panels and agriculture uses of growing and harvesting of vegetables, fruits, berries, nuts, or other similar products. So in terms of the process, we held a public information meeting on February 5th, and it was well attended. Staff received one correspondence after the meeting, which is included in at the end of my report. And staff have reviewed the application and researched the best practices, and we are now at the Planning Advisory Committee for review and recommendation. And that will move on to council for first reading, most likely for this month, and also then public hearing and a second reading in April. And again, if the application was approved by council, the notice of approval will be placed in paper, and that will outline the 14-day appeal period to the Nova Scotia Utility and the Review Board. So this concludes my presentation, and I have two recommendations on the screen. I know there's a lot of information, so I would be happy to take any questions that this committee member may have. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions for Will? Mark?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Well, thanks for the presentation. I heard the excitement in your voice while you were presenting, and I want you to know I share it. I think this is a great project for Windsor to have. It's King's Edge Hill have been a fantastic neighbor to the surrounding community in there for a very long time. And I also know the farm next door to them are excited for it as well. So Kings Outshell is going to be generating power for their own institution, and the property is going to remain in agriculture. It's going to help with stormwater management and all sorts of things. So I think it's a win-win all the way around, and I'm personally excited to see how it's going to progress. So it's good stuff.
There being no further questions. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Just more of a comment. I too am very excited and heard the excitement in your voice here. And just like the question that I have, like, has the planning department looked at ways of scaling these type of projects? Because it seems like a very interesting blend of agriculture as well as looking at energy sovereignty at the same time. So just kind of curious in the research that you folks have done, you know, are the spidey senses, you know, going in the planning department around like how can, you know, looking at saving a lot of the agriculture land within our municipality can be utilized this type of system approach?
Yeah, through chair to the committee member, that is a good question. So for this amendment, this will be specific to the institutional zone, but definitely this is something we could expand upon for other zones like agriculture and or a wider community. But for tonight's discussion, this will be just specific to the subject lot, but definitely we can look into that through the plan review, ongoing plan review for sure.
Guido?
Through you, Chair. I share the excitement, and I was present the night of the PIM. It was a very good presentation. Also, the zoning previously was an R1, so it's now basically becoming an agricultural, which is quite a good thing. Today we see the opposite happening, and a lot of agricultural land becoming residential. So that is a win for the production. My question is formal, technical, on the rules here. Are we voting two different amendments, and so we need to have two different motions? It seems to me that we have amending this zoning, and then we have amending the Windsor, what you call it, law on agrivoltaic. So two different things.
Through chair to the committee member, yes, there are two motions tonight. And the first motion is to, basically this motion is about rezoning request. And the second motion is to allow the agrivoltaic system to add it on the land use bylaw of Windsor. Thank you.
Yeah. Mark?
Yep. Through you, Chair. This isn't a requirement for this project. It's just a suggestion on my part. I know I watched the PIM, and the applicant was very forthcoming to help their neighbors with a buffer zone if they needed it. Windsor has a serious nuisance deer problem, and I know they haven't built in any parameters to deal with that for their agricultural part. They're going to be up to their neck with it, and it may all be for naught if they don't do some type of fencing or protection for that area. So they might want to look at incorporating some type of deer fence into their construction plans for the perimeter of the property.
Mayor Zabin? Sorry, Councillor.
If there's no more questions, I was going to make the motion, but I'm assuming that's
We were
fine.
That's you're on the same page.
I'll let you do it if you want, but I'll do it. That's okay. If there's no other questions, Chair.
Go ahead.
I'll move that PAC-HEC recommends that council give first reading and hold a public hearing to consider amending the zoning map of the Windsor Land Use Bylaw to rezone PID 454-05784 on College Road in Windsor from single unit residential R1 to the institutional zone as shown in the report number 25-01 to the Planning Heritage Advisory Committee dated March 13, 2025.
Second.
Moved by Mayor Zabin, second by Councillor Larry Pinch. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Like the second one there, Chair, as well.
Absolutely.
PACHE recommends that council give first reading and hold a public hearing to consider amending the Windsor Land Use Bylaw to allow agrivoltaic systems as an accessory use in the institutional zone as shown in the report number 25-01 to the Planning Heritage Advisory Committee dated March 13th, 2025.
Second.
Seconded. Moved by Mayor Zabian, seconded by Councillor Larry Pinch. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, moving right along, our next order of business is file 24-26, rezoning of 1177 King Street, Windsor, PID 450-53816, and Senior Planner Dunphy has a presentation about that.
Thank you, Chair. I'll jump right into it. So we received a completed application from Peter Detmers on November 8th, 2024. And the application was to rezone the subject lot from single unit residential to the 2-unit residential to allow for conversion of the existing residence to a 2-unit dwelling as well as subdivision of the subject lot. So here we can see an orthophoto of the property and the surrounding properties. Currently, it has a single unit dwelling located on it centrally in the property. Nearby other properties consist primarily of single unit residences, as well as a graveyard to the southwest. So that would be bottom left of the image here. And this subject lot actually has frontage on both King Street and Tremaine, so it is a corner lot. Looking at the generalized future land use map, this property, as well as most of the surrounding area, is designated residential, except for the graveyard previously identified. That's in the community use designation. As for zoning, a lot of single unit residential on the subject property as well as the surrounding properties. There is a sort of sliver of institutional to the east of this property, as well as some higher density residential. And then again, the open space zone is at the bottom left, and that's the graveyard. So the zone that they're looking for here is the 2-unit residential zone, and the permitted uses within this zone include all uses within the R1 zone subject to those requirements, converted dwellings to a maximum of 2 units, and 2-unit dwellings. So that's what they're looking for with this rezoning application. So here we can see the subject lot from Tremaine. The other street is just a little further, King, to the left-hand side of this image. And there it is. Glad it doesn't look like that today. For our policies, the first one up is policy 5.1.4. This enables council to consider rezoning land within the residential designation to 2-unit residential. And in summary, the proposal is compatible with the traffic generation, population density, and architectural design and scale of the area. The proposal provides adequate on-site parking and access to the subject lot. As well, the development officer and municipal traffic authority have no further concerns, which are not otherwise addressed in the report. And then, of course, our general criteria policy, and this is for all amendments to the land use bylaw. So in summary, the proposal is considered met here, as it's not considered premature or inappropriate for the area based on the policy criteria. No municipal costs related to the proposal are anticipated, and the fire chief, development officer, manager of building and fire inspection services, public works engineering division, and municipal traffic authority have no concerns which have not otherwise been addressed in the report. So with this specific subject lot, staff identified that there was a restrictive covenant. And so I'll get into it on this slide, but essentially this restrictive covenant was registered to the subject lot in 1954, and it only permitted single unit dwellings. It restricted subdivision on the properties and some other minor details that are not so relevant now. They're based on cost of construction, around $7,000 for anyone curious. So we spoke to the municipal solicitor, and they explained that restrictive covenants are based in private law and that government authorities are based in public law. For an example, the Municipal Government Act. So Therefore, staff cannot base their recommendation on the contents of a restrictive covenant as it's a different system of law. Additionally, the property owner here is seeking to remove the restrictive covenant from the subject lot, and that's a separate private matter from what we have tonight. So for the public information meeting that was held on January 15th, it was broadcast live on the municipal YouTube page, and 8 members of the public attended the meeting with only 1 individual speaking. The deadline for comments was the 29th of January, and staff received 3 phone calls and 9 pieces of written correspondence during that comment period. In general, the concerns included increased traffic, municipal service strain, increased density, privacy impacts, environmental impacts, property values, and community character. So staff just have a couple responses generally to these comments. For the traffic concerns, the traffic authority commented that the site is considered to have safe driveway access to both King Street and Tremaine Crescent, and they had no further concerns regarding the proposed rezoning. For the municipal services and environmental impact, the Public Works Engineering Division commented that they had no concerns regarding the increased capacity request. They also commented that through the subdivision process, a lot grading plan would be required alongside confirmation of no increase in stormwater flow from the property. So very similar to the requirement of a stormwater management plan, but here it would be a stamped and signed letter memo certificate from a professional engineer confirming that there would be no increase in stormwater flow. For the density and community character, in our current planning documents, Council's policy 5.1.4, referenced previously, permits applications such as this one to be considered in all areas designated residential. The addition of 3 dwelling units is not considered to be a major change to the population density of Windsor. And for property values and privacy are not considered within the criteria of the policy of the current planning documents, and as such, staff cannot consider those items when making recommendations. So for the process to date, we had, again, our public information meeting on January 15th. Staff then did an in-depth review of the application and brought forward a review and recommendation report tonight to PAC. Next, we'll move on to council for first reading on March 25th, and then on to the public hearing and second reading on April 22nd. If approved there, a notice of approval would be placed in the paper with a 14-day appeal period to follow. That brings us to the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Alex? Jane?
Thank you. Alex, this recommendation is assuming that the covenant is going to be removed?
Through you, Chair, no. So the explanation that we received from the municipal solicitor is that as a government authority, we are not able to comment on or interact with something such as a restrictive covenant, which is within the world of private law or civil law. So we deal with public law, and this is a device used in private law for civil matters. So as a municipality, we are not able to interact with that document.
No, thank you. Through you, Chair, I understand that part of it. You're assuming that the covenant is going to be removed in order for it to be rezoned R2, because the covenant says it can't be rezoned R2. So that's where I'm coming from. So let's assume that the covenant is removed and it's rezoned R2. Is it the intent of the property owner to put a duplex, so 1 unit with 2 separate, like a regular duplex with 2 doors in the front is just one building? And if that's the case, are accessory suites entitled to be built in the back? And that's where you get your 3 buildings from in the previous slide?
Yeah, through you, Chair, I just want to clarify something. So the expectation of staff is not that we are anticipating that this will be removed. That's a separate private matter that we won't comment on. That's a private concern. The main item is that as municipal staff, any level, we're not able to interact with that item. So that can't become a factor of the rezoning, nor does it affect staff's recommendation, the recommendation of this committee or council's decision.
Thank you. Just to follow up. No, I understand what you're saying. So the next question is, what is the intent of the property owner? Is it to build a duplex, single dwelling with 2 units inside that envelope, which would then entitle him to put 2 accessory suites in the back? So I'm asking.
Yep. So the intent of the rezoning is to convert the single unit dwelling into a 2-unit dwelling and then to subdivide the lot to create an additional 2-unit dwelling.
Through you, Chair, a quick question stemming from ignorance, as I don't know, or I'm not sure, Alex. Are we doing this amendments based on the Housing Accelerator Fund already, or this is simply normal administration without the fund?
Through you, Chair. So this is separate to the Housing Accelerator item that staff have been working on. This is using our current day planning documents and the regular process throughout.
Thank you.
No further questions? Oh, sorry, Mayor Xavier.
Okay, through you, Chair, to Planner Dunphy. So Planner Dunphy, as it stands currently, is he permitted to subdivide the lot in an R1, or does he have to zone to an R2 to be able to subdivide as well?
Through you, Chair. Sorry, I just missed the first part of that question. Do you mind repeating?
Currently, the zoning is R1. Is he permitted to subdivide it now as an R1 lot and create another R1 on the second, or does it have to be R2 for him to subdivide?
Right. Got you. Thank you. I don't have comments from the development officer whether the likelihood of an approval for another single unit lot through subdivision. So I don't have that answer in front of me if the subdivision for another single unit dwelling would be approved at this point in time through our processes. But I can find that out.
But under an R2, it would allow it to subdivide, or I'm a little confused. Just to convert to an R2 to be able to subdivide. I'm just trying to get it straight.
Yep. Yeah. So just to clarify, that's the intent that this individual is looking for. Based on the comments from our development officers, the requirements of the R2 zone can be met through subdivision to create 2 lots. I don't think they've identified whether this could be subdivided through single unit residential. Okay. I'll go out on a branch and say that I think the subdivision requirements for the R1 and R2 zone are somewhat similar. So it's likely. However, I don't have that confirmation, but I certainly can get that confirmation.
It's just an odd configuration on the lot and where the resident sits now, and just trying to piece in my mind how it would be subdivided and where a second dwelling would go. I think that's the concern of a lot of the residents in that area, is where it would be positioned and how it would meet a setback, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a lot of questions. I think that's why we're getting a lot of correspondence on it. And
Councillor Ivey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question that was just asked as well. Very helpful with regards to the positioning there, and in an area where there is historic flooding that is within the area. And so I'm glad to see the control mechanism there for control of flooding based on pre and post development flows. I think it's important. That entire section of Tremaine can be awash with flooding when it comes into that marsh area. So I appreciate that. I did just want to go back and touch on, I think, part of the confusion on the restrictive covenant, which is clear, and you have explained that, Planner Dunphy, but there is a notation in here that the property owner, that they're currently making, seeking to remove the restrictive covenant. But it occurs to me, based on what you've told us, that that doesn't matter. Am I correct on that? That just, I'm not sure about, it's in here that they're seeking to remove it, but it doesn't matter whether they do or don't, based on our decision for what we would look at with this application. Is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Chair. That is correct. So regardless of whether the restrictive covenant is ultimately removed or if it is not ultimately removed, the recommendation of staff, committees, council as a municipal entity can't interact with it. So it essentially doesn't change whether that documentation is in place or not.
Okay, thank you. So it's as if whether the owner seeks to remove it or not does not matter as far as our decision making is concerned. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Jane?
Sorry, just to follow up on the subdivision and the duplex on each new lot. Each duplex would then, depending on the lot size, be able to put an accessory suite for each of those units. So it'd be 3 on one lot and 3 on another. Am I following that line of thinking correctly? But it would depend, the size of the accessory units would be dependent upon the original building, correct?
Haven't brushed up on the secondary suite allowances, but essentially that's correct. So they would be through the R2 zone, they would be able to do a 2-unit as of right. And then of course the subdivision to get a second lot. And so there, in that case, there would be two 2-unit dwellings, and they would be eligible for a secondary suite on each of those properties if it met the setbacks and if it could meet all the requirements that go into the secondary suite approval.
Right. And that's where you were talking about the 3 units in the previous slide.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, right. Thank you.
So,
Councillor Larry Pinch?
I was just going to provide a quick piece of clarity because I live in an area that has restrictive covenants, which may be helpful because it helped me to understand when I moved out there. So those are enforceable civilly. So your neighbors, the people who live within those restrictive covenants, would have to enforce those. So municipal, provincial, nobody else can enforce them. So it has to be enforceable by your neighbors. So theoretically, this person could move ahead and then take the risk or chance that their neighbors would civilly enforce those restrictive covenants, but that's how they're enforceable. Otherwise, they don't do anything.
We don't.
thank you. Through your chair, quick question. How many acres is the property?
Through you, Chair, that is a good question. I don't know if I have that number offhand. I can prepare that and have that ready for the next first reading, though.
Councillor Ivy, your light was on, or you're good? Okay, we have a motion before us. Is anyone willing to move that forward? There being nobody to move that forward? Councillor Ivy?
I'll put the motion forward for discussion. The PAC Act recommends that council give first reading and hold a public hearing to consider amending Schedule A of the Windsor Land Use Bylaw to rezone PID 45053816 at 1177 King Street in Windsor from the single unit residential R1 to 2-unit residential R2, as shown in the report file 24-26 to the Planning and Heritage Advisory Committee dated March 13th, 2025.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Ivy, seconded by Councillor Larry Pinch. Any discussion on that? Councillor Ivy? Guido?
Sure. I'm wondering, I don't really know how to put it, but I wonder if we should wait for the Housing Accelerator Fund to kick in to consider something like this. We are not certain about the acreage of the property. It doesn't seem to be huge. And it is my understanding that this property could have 6 dwellings in total. I take a look at the picture and I am perplexed of the size, aside from the local covenant. I wonder just if we should refer to something that comes with the Housing Accelerator Fund. I'm not sure that our legislation in this moment allows all that, and just uncertain.
Councillor Larry Pinch.
I was just going to comment that I think a lot of the concerns that I hear around this table, and my own as well, have to do with looking at that lot and understanding where exactly they plan to place that other structure. I don't know if it is an option to request a site plan or to request additional information that would allow us to better understand the placement of those structures.
Go ahead, Alex.
Through you, Chair, for our planning process purposes, rezonings do not require a site plan. So that's not something that we have the ability to ask. However, we don't have the ability to require that.
Jane?
Thank you. I'm all for creating extra housing, and I can see a duplex going on that corner lot. But anything more than one duplex, I think, encroaches on the feeling of the single unit neighborhood, going in each direction except for across to the cemetery. That would be a multi-residential facility. So I'm not able to support this recommendation.
Councillor Larry Pinch.
Through you, Chair, to Planner Dunphy. Is there, I know not a requirement, but is there a potential for you to obtain the information on setback requirements so that we would know whether they could add an additional suite onto that, or whether it would, based on the requirements, just be a duplex on that additional lot?
Through you, Chair. Yes, I can make that request to the development officer. We've based our analysis off of what the intent of the project was, so that being the 2 duplexes. However, if there's some curiosity around the opportunity for secondary suites, we can get that information.
Mark?
Yep, through your chair. Alex, just to be clear, they can switch to R2, which I have no problem with, but even then they would be as of right. But they would still have to meet all the setback requirements for any buildings that they decide to build on it. So that would be addressed at that point.
Through you, Chair. Yes, that's correct. So a rezoning will change the zoning of the entire lot. However, it doesn't change the fact that only one main building is permitted on the lot, with the exception of secondary suites. So in this case, a separate subdivision process is required to meet the intent of this project. And in that subdivision process, the proposal is required to meet all the setbacks that are regularly required as part of that subdivision. And in this case, where it would be the rezoning to the R2, they would, I believe that the R2 zone has slightly different subdivision requirements than the R1 zone. But again, I will confirm that with the development officer in further reports.
Mayor Zabian?
Oh, sorry.
It's a half an acre lot. It's about 21,000 square feet. So it's a half an acre lot, as per viewpoint anyways. Through you, Chair, to Planner Dunphy. I think I'd like a little bit more information as well, just on what can go there. It's I know site plan is not required under a rezoning, but it's just hard to piece it all together. Yeah, that's just my comments on my end.
Yeah, if I may, Chair,
Good.
through you, Chair, I commune with the feeling of the mayor. It's hard to figure out what's the reason for an R2 in that lot, and possibly if it was possible to have a little more information, even just beginning from the acreage and other the reasoning behind that. I am not against this recommendation or that these people want to make an R2, but a few more items could help understand something that now is quite up in the air for many of us, and probably we are sharing a common feeling here in the room: uncertainty.
Councillor Ivy?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear the comments coming around the table here. And I do also sense that sense of uncertainty regarding some of the questions that have been asked, although, the mayor's been able to source the size of the lot, but there are questions regarding future potential subdivision and the like. And I just think I'm getting a sense that, without speaking for anybody else, that there seems to be a certain uncertainty around here as to what it is that we're about to give an okay to. So I would agree with that. And so we have a motion on the floor, however. So direction on that would be we can either defer requesting more information, come back to the next planning meeting. And I guess just checking with staff to make sure, is that the right thing for us to do with this? Stays on the floor, we defer it, or if somebody else wants to weigh in procedurally, that would be helpful so we can do this as tidily as possible. Mayor Zabian?
I'll move we defer to the next meeting to get the information from Planner Dunphy.
I'll second it.
Deferral moved by Mayor Zabian, seconded by Councillor Larry Pinch. All those in favor of deferral? Any opposed? Motion passed. For deferral. Okay, the next thing we have on our agenda is file 25-13, Development Agreement, Bear Lake Wind Farm. This is Acting Director Fougere. Has a presentation. Thank you.
Chair, can I call a point of order on this one, or a point of information? I'm not sure which.
Sure.
This is a new file. It has a new file number. I know they have closed their initial file and resubmitted a new file, and it has new parameters and new criteria in the file. And I'm wondering why it has skipped over public process and the PIM meeting.
Yeah, through your chair, I
Sure,
can
go
speak
ahead.
to that, to you, Mark. So because the application hasn't changed, it's the exact same application that was presented at the PIM last April. In consultation with our municipal solicitor, it was determined that we don't have to repeat that process. So there still will be the requirement for a public hearing once it goes forward to council.
And through your chair, sorry, I appreciate that, because I did compare the two. Other than the new parameters and criteria, they are the same. I understand that, but my issue is the public was presented a different development agreement with different parameters they were spoken to, and now council, or it's gotten to this stage, is debating a totally different. It is a different file, so I do feel like it should go back to. I can live with it skipping maybe public consultation, but it should go to a public information meeting so the public is aware that things have changed.
Through your chair, I just want to clarify that the development agreement and all of the parameters within are changed. It's only the policy criteria that we are evaluating it against that has changed. That is the only difference. But all of the original agreed upon setbacks and all the other terms within the development agreement remains unchanged.
Okay, thank you. I know I have a lot of questions, and I'm sure the public would have had a lot of questions too. So, I mean, I guess they can save them for like the next public meeting. That's the direction?
Through your chair. So through the public hearing process. So if council, if it moves forward recommendation to council for first reading, council gives first reading, it goes to public hearing. And at that point, the public will receive a presentation from myself as well as the applicant, and there'll be the opportunity to ask questions or provide comments to council for council to take into consideration before making their final decision at second reading.
Councillor Larry Pinch.
Thank you, through you, Chair, to Manager Fougier. I don't know if I can make this request, so it's more of a suggestion. If there is any potential for the municipality to post on their website those new provincial regulations that have come in, the MGA amendments, I have shared them from the provincial website myself. But if we could make sure that it is publicly available from our perspective too, that we are sharing that we have received them and that this is what new development agreements for turbines, these are the policies that they'll be subject to, that would be awesome. And if it occurred and I missed it, my apologies.
Go ahead, Vanessa.
It is posted on the website under staff reports.
I mean, more, can we put it on social media on our
Okay.
page where we share a lot of like the planning advisory committee meetings and other documents, and the CBCL report is on there with the meeting. If we could just make it more publicized, I guess that would be appreciated.
Through you, Chair,
What?
for Kerry. When we say the change of policy, are we simply literally meaning the different number in setback from the property that the Minister John Law imposed on the county? Is that?
Yes, absolutely. So as you recall, the municipality submitted amendments to the province back in the fall for the 2.5 kilometer setback changes within our municipal planning strategy. So in January, we heard back from the province and they approved our amendments with their own amendments. And that's where the setbacks are now 4 times the height of the turbine, or specific to noise and shadow flicker requirements that is addressed within the environmental assessment. So whichever one is greater. So those are the setbacks that we have to, or the requirements that we have to work within now. Previously, we didn't have any setback requirements. So that's why the development agreement that is before you tonight speaks to 1,000 meters setback to dwellings and 550 meters to wood camps. And I believe it's 1.1 times turbine height to lot lines. So it's a little bit more than what our now minimum requirements are. Further to that, we used to have a criteria speaking to the visual intrusiveness of these developments. That is no longer criteria we can consider. So that was part of the amendments that the province made. And further, it's a little bit further down on the agenda tonight, but it's relevant. The province has recently come back last week and is imposing this across the province. So all municipalities in Nova Scotia will be required to amend their planning strategies to include these new requirements.
Thank you, Manager. A further question to that. It seems like the setback is taking on a level of complexity that wasn't having before, meaning that 2.5 kilometers or 1.5 kilometers are quite a simple number to understand for everybody. Where the public and us, can take information precise based on the variability of a height of a windmill. And I would like to ask you actually, from what height to what height now windmills are built, because I don't know it. And then where can we see the multiplicator factor, the 4 times, 5 times, whatever, because it's becoming quite difficult to understand the setback at this point. So where we can have an official point and what is the height from to? Thank you.
Just a point
Yeah.
of order, Chair, just before Manager Fujiera. I think we've gotten halfway through the presentation by answering questions
I
on
was just going
on
to
the
say,
content,
perhaps
but-
some of these questions may appear in your,
through the presentation
You
of,
can
of the
follow up with
file
that.
from Manager Fujiera, but
Yeah, perhaps I can kind of, I feel like I've answered some questions that I might be addressing, so I don't want to repeat myself, so I can sort of kind of go through the slides and we can
Sure.
focus on any information and I can answer that question as well in terms of your question about setbacks.
Councillor Ivey?
I don't want to suggest a point of order on a point of order, but I think we have a point of order that's been put on the floor that requires a ruling before we proceed in some fashion. And I think the point of order is what triggered, I guess, the response that we got from legal counsel. And I don't know that we get to debate a point of order on this matter or not. If we don't, then it's again, I could be on uncertain ground here, but I think a decision needs to be made on the point of order that was put forward that started this discussion, and then we proceed, accordingly.
if I may help you out,
Please.
Chair.
Please.
I think Manager Fujiera answered the first point of order question, saying legal has advised that this can proceed under a new development agreement without public information session. I again, that would be my interpretation of the first point of order. Sure.
No, and through me, Chair, I agree. Legal did say you could proceed with this the way we're handling it tonight on the agenda, but it doesn't mean we should. I do think it's unfair to the public that they're not being. This is a new file that should go through the proper stages of every file that gets submitted.
Councillor Larry Pinch?
Just a comment. So, in follow up to Marcus, so fair, we could recommend to council that we suggest that this go back to public hearing is an option from the point of order. But I would also like to point out that there was the opportunity for this previous agreement to continue on in the stage that it was, but those proponents chose to remove that agreement and put in a new agreement so that they could follow with the new amendments that the provincial government has imposed. And so therefore, that was their choice. So it wouldn't be a terrible recommendation or out of order, I don't think, to request that it follows through the full process again. Just my comment.
I second that.
Being new to this, I'm not sure what question is before me.
Trying to word my words correctly, so committee, I'm just not sure the purpose of why you'd want to send it back to council to make a recommendation to conduct a public information session. The public already knows the application. It's the exact same application. Again, this is not giving my personal opinion on the file. I believe, the public's made aware. The public info session is probably the most important, in my opinion, of the process, but it's the same. It would be the same public information session. It just comes down to what criteria that council will base the application on. That's the only difference. I think the public is very aware of that criteria change. It's been all over the news, the comments all over social media. The public is very aware of the criteria change that council will weigh this application against. That's my two takes on it.
Councillor Finch.
So I would agree with the mayor that the public is aware in all likelihood of the policy amendments. There have been a lot of individuals making sure that the public's aware. However, the public may not be aware that the application was removed and resubmitted. So they may have thought the application was complete, and so they wouldn't necessarily have been made aware that the application has been resubmitted because that is done through the public information session. That would be my response.
Councillor Ivy.
I don't disagree with almost everything that we've said here. It's to try and work it through to what's going to make the most sense. And if I analyze what's in front of us, we could push this to council, to push it back to a public information session, to properly, in my mind, properly and fully follow the procedure with any application that comes in. That the applicant decided to withdraw the original application was their choice. They could have made a single change within that application, making it different in some fashion. That they chose not to, also their choice to do that. That legally we are not bound to put them back to a public information meeting does not mean that there aren't other criteria as part of the decision process. And I'll point out what's been showing up in our council packages in the last week with every file that's come to us is balanced decision making. And with a balanced decision making, it's not that we just weigh it based on one factor, but several: economics, legal, political, social, community, public interest, all those factors. And this one is heavy on the public input, public aspect of what's going on, because it's a significant change in an area. The shortest way to get this through, if we had to pick one or the other, would be to push it to a public information meeting immediately and get it back here in 4 weeks in front of a planning committee. That's just my analysis on it. Could be wrong, but that would be the quickest way versus it having to get to council to push it back to then trigger a public information meeting to then get it back here as an extra step. I could be way off in left field on this. I know that this is a big issue, but if the process is with each application, then it should be that it's back to start, just because we get other applications that come in that are almost mirror copies of other ones that have gone before them from different organizations or different people, but we still take them through the process. We're in this cycle with this industry right now, and with this application. It's unfortunate, but seeing what I've seen historically, that it just occurs to me that we're best to follow that standard procedure, that we stick with it and go with it.
If I may, Chair, I just want to just provide a little bit more information on what Councillor Ivy mentioned. In terms of scheduling a PIM, there is some consideration around our advertisement timeline. So that does kind of push things out a little bit further. So just wanted to make that note. And secondly, I just want to highlight the public hearing that will still be required. So my staff report will also include all of the notes from the previous public information meeting and any correspondence we received thereafter. And the public hearing is an opportunity to have the public speak on record to this application, provide their feedback immediately in front of council before they make their final decision. So I just want to, I guess, add that piece that there is still opportunity for the public to consider the application and provide feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Form matters, and we learned it in January, between January 26 and January 28, when this pack was dismantled and then remounted. And form is what have us following as best as we can Robert's Rules of Order. Here, a number has changed, and Marcus has given a great opening salve, and we should follow procedure.
Mayor Zabian.
What's the requirement of an application, Manager Fugier, to begin with? If an applicant wishes to take something directly to council, they have a right, correct?
So there is, through your chair, there is requirements to go through the public process, and then through to PACAC, of course. And then the applicant does have the right to bring it forward to first reading, regardless of the recommendation that PACAC provides, whether it's for or against. And then we recommend that council give first reading so that the application has the opportunity to be heard through a public hearing, and the public has the opportunity to provide that before deciding on whether or not to approve or not the development. Does that answer your question?
In and out, yeah.
You look like you have something to say, Councillor Finch. Councillor Ivey?
Just in follow-up to the mayor's question on this, just so that, again, because time, not that time doesn't concern me, we can keep on working our way through tonight, right? I don't want that to be the preface here, but I'm going to through you, Chair, to Acting Director Fugere. Regardless of what is decided here this evening, would this application automatically land with council at its next meeting? Because we've seen that whether if PAC rejects an application, it still goes to council where the decision is made. I don't want us to go around in a circle for the sake of going around in a circle. Okay. Can you put added clarity on that so it's really clear to us, Director Fisher?
Through your chair, anybody else jump in, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of procedure is that if a motion is on the floor, a recommendation is made, and it's either turned down or approved, that recommendation will go through or to first reading. It'll be noted in the report that it was either recommended or not, and council can take that into consideration on what the committee has said. So it's our preference that a recommendation of some sort go forward, whether that's I recommend to not, or I recommend to. And of course, as we've seen with the previous application, the committee can also make amendments to the motion as well.
Right. Thank you.
Councillor Branch?
So then I recommend that the Planning Advisory, Heritage Advisory Committee request that this application go back to public information session.
I'll second that.
So do we have a motion before us? Everybody understands what the motion was? Do we have a show of hands in support of that motion?
I got a question there, Chair.
Absolutely.
Manager Fugere, can you give us the legal advice again on the requirements of the public info session again?
Yeah, absolutely. Through your chair to you, Mayor. We received a legal opinion from the municipal solicitor that a public information meeting is not required. It would be considered an additional public information meeting. They were satisfied that that requirement has already been met with the original application, as nothing has changed since that point. So we can't require it. So
again, I'm not a legal expert by any means. I have a duty to uphold the rules of the municipality, etc. And I'm not even giving my opinion on the application at this point, but I believe it still has to move forward through a recommendation, whether this committee wants to approve what's as recommended or not. Committee, but something will go to council in 2 weeks' time, and council will figure it out.
So I think that's in response, sorry, why I made that recommendation is because it's going to go through to council anyways, but what council's going to see is that the recommendation, if supported from Planning Advisory, Heritage Advisory Committee, is that it goes back to public information session, not as a requirement, but as a request. because we are, correct me if I'm wrong, Manager Fougier, we are allowed to make requests. Might not be a requirement, but we can make a request.
I would have to consult the municipal solicitor on this. This is kind of a unique situation. So yeah, I don't feel comfortable completely, providing, I guess, direction on that. Yeah.
And I just, sorry.
Feel free.
In follow-up, regardless of how you feel about it, I think we have seen from a public response perspective what happens when people feel as though we have not followed a process that's been in place in the past. I don't think that this going back to a public information session changes anything. It still comes ahead again following the process, but it would save a lot of frustration from residents and also time on the municipality's behalf to deal with that correspondence that will most definitely be received should it not follow through the same process as every other development agreement. So I just wanted to make that as a point.
Yeah, and just like my further point to it as well, like I think requesting it, and like this company probably understands the tensions that are connected with this, but like it also leads into the goodwill, like this company is coming into our community, and like community has voiced their concerns. So I think messaging it, like regardless of what, like I understand the legal note that we've received here, but as a like looking at it from like a municipality culture standpoint, our our community members, our citizens are voicing concerns around this, and we can make the request in the goodwill component of like this company looking to come into our jurisdiction. Like I'm ready to move into a vote.
Mark?
Yeah, I know, I'm aware there's a motion on the floor. I'm just curious, as with the past recommendation, would it be prudent to table it and seek more information on the motion itself, or just continue with the motion?
Mayor Zabi?
Again, this is an advisory committee to council, so whatever this committee feels it wants to advise council, it can put any recommendation forward as Councillor Pinch, Larry Pinch has done. So, and then council will make a decision one way or another. So,
Councillor Larry Pinch?
I'm directing this at Mayor Zabian, my apologies. But even if we defer it, it still goes through to council. So whether we make a recommendation or we defer it, what we are saying is my understanding is that this is still going to go through to council on the 25th. So regardless of which way we decide to go, the end outcome of it going to council is still the same, correct?
your motion is to request council do a public info session.
Yes, but if we if that motion was defeated and it got deferred or it was withdrawn, and we went with Marcus Keogh's suggestion, which is that it gets deferred until further information, would it then come back to PACAC prior to going to council if we request further information?
If committee requires further information, it would have to be very specific on what information it's looking for.
The question directed as to whether we could make the recommendation that Manager Fougier would have to obtain the information from a municipal solicitor.
Through your chair, just would the committee be interested in hearing the application and the recommendation that I'm suggesting? And should the committee feel at that time that they still would prefer to have a public information meeting to amend that motion to include that piece? So council can consider it at the next council meeting either way. If they want to send it back to a public information meeting and go through the process again, that's great. If not, they can consider the application at that point.
So I guess the question before us, would there be value in seeing the presentation and voting on the motion post-presentation, or amending it and moving forward? Because it seems right now we're in a spiral here that we're not moving out of. We know.
Through Chair, I think that given the amount of data we have on the package tonight, it would be wise to just stick by the procedural informality of the number and start the process from the scratch without listening to the presentation, as valuable as it is. We will see the presentation anyway, just following through the proper channel. Just a matter of a few weeks, so that we don't create a problem of form and procedure.
Mayor Zabian, you're looking for your button.
Yeah, I keep on hearing proper procedure, proper procedure. I think proper procedure has been established that the municipality has followed to this point.
Mark?
Through you, Chair, I disagree with that. It is not followed proper procedure. It is seek the legal advice to not follow proper procedure and fast track it to this meeting. And that's my question, is to follow proper procedure and all new applicants start with the PIM.
Through your chair, so the legal opinion is based on whether or not this application requires to have an additional PIM. And that was determined that it doesn't. It has met all of the requirements to be heard at PACAC and further council. So it's not a legal opinion on whether or not we are not following procedure. We are following procedure, and that's the legal opinion confirmed that.
We do have a motion on the floor, Chair. I believe that's been moved and seconded, so maybe address the motion to begin with.
Could somebody refresh me on what exactly that motion was?
That we recommend to council that this development application goes back to public information meeting.
Is there a seconder for that?
Yeah, I second it. Going to vote by show of hands. Those in favor?
Opposed? Motion carried. So with that, I would assume that we won't be seeing the presentation on that. Don't know. So if that's the case, then the next item I have on my agenda here is the wind turbine policy research. Again, that's Carrie.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I don't have a presentation for this report, but I just wanted to provide the committee with this information. I know we kind of already touched on this a little bit, but at the January council meeting, council directed staff to conduct research on potential future amendments to the West Hants municipal planning strategy to limit the number of wind farms in West Hants. So since that council meeting, the province has set requirements for wind farms in the MGA for all municipalities to follow across Nova Scotia, including separation distances and that visual impacts shall not be considered when evaluating applications. So as detailed in my report, the municipality is quite limited in its ability to apply further restrictions, giving that direction from the province, and staff feels it's unlikely that any amendments that serve to further restrict or limit wind farm developments be approved by the province. So just happy to take any questions providing this information.
Councillor Ivey.
Thank you, Chair, and I'll be brief. I just want to highlight that the motion as worded and as intended was to seek to have staff bring back information to council that may serve, not to actually bring an end to, but that may serve to limit the total volume of wind turbines within West Hants over time. And the purpose of that was we realized that we were already in a situation where, based on provincial regulation, that the application, at least as it existed at that time, had the ability to proceed and go forward with the existing regulations that were in place. And I'm not going to go back to what we just finished talking about for such a long period of time, but fundamentally that was the purpose, was to try and see if council could have some ability to have some control over the land use for which we are charged with being responsible for within the region. We fully realized at that time that cake was baked. but the cake isn't baked because it's been changed. And so that was the purpose of this. And what we've had brought back is, or what's been the response is all the reasons that council can't seek to have any tools in place to be able to manage the region overall with regards to what it may want to set as a limiting factor. That may be that once you hit a certain point that we're full for wind terms. That's what was sought for within this information that we were seeking. What does exist, or what could we do to try and have some control of what takes place within the area that we look to administer on behalf of the residents. But I didn't see anything in here. I get creative reading your, which I really appreciate. What you've identified is these are kind of, you can't do anything about these areas. There are areas that I would have thought of, but it may be that we have to look at this, differently, and again, over time. But that was the purpose of this, and I do appreciate the report and the information being here. But it was for an over time look at what we could do to try and manage things here, and have some control over what's coming in here by way of larger than we've historically seen here wind turbines within the region. So I just want to share that as a comment, and I thank you again.
Councillor Larry Pilch.
Through you to Manager Fougere. I was just curious, within your knowledge. So Kempville has a moratorium, not that that is what we were looking for, but on wind turbines. So does the province's new legislation affect their moratorium in Kempville? So the moratorium will be removed from Kempville? Because I know in your report you had said you can't place a moratorium, but they have one. So I'm just curious as to what happens there.
Through your chair to Councillor. So in discussions with our municipal solicitor on that moratorium piece, any moratoriums in place right now probably wouldn't hold up in like a UARB hearing, for example, because there's no sort of mechanism in the MGA that would allow that to happen. So a lot of these are sort of historically added in and may not have been used. And further to that, yes, the other part of your question. So the MGA requirements will apply to all municipalities. So they didn't give a time limit, but it's sort of as soon as possible, please amend your policy documents to be in alignment with the new MGA requirements. So it'll likely have to be removed, their moratorium.
Mark?
Yeah, I have a few questions on this one. My first one, through you, Chair, is has the municipality pushed back on this at all with legal?
Your chair, like in terms of responding to the province, or?
Yes.
Okay, not to my knowledge, we have not.
Because just looking at it, I understand the province has the power to change policy to meet the a mandate of Nova Scotia, that sort of thing. But where it gets grave for me is when a landowner who is trying to lease a prohibited activity on their property to profit from it changes policy that increases the opportunity for their leasee to get approved. All the other wind farms in Hants County had to go by a certain set of rules. But when the province's own property wants to put a wind farm on it, they changed the policies. So especially the sight lines. I mean, they just removed that because that was an actual, so that was something that could have, a criteria that could have been voted against them on. And is that not a conflict of interest or abuse of power?
I don't really have an opinion on the latter part of your question, but ultimately the municipality is a creature of the province. So we are subject to the requirements of the MGA, and ultimately the province can decide what they want to do and what legislation they want to impose on municipalities. And yeah, we have to essentially look to the MGA when making our decisions and when drafting our own policies, and we have to be in an alignment with it.
I don't think we have to accept it at face value, though. I think, anyway, if there is pushback, I welcome it. I also want to say, I'm not totally opposed to the new amendments. I think I'm reading them different than everybody else, and maybe you can give me some clarity on it. But Section B says adequate separation distances are maintained from adjacent land uses to minimize impacts of noise, shadow, and public safety. But installations shall not be required to have separation distance from a dwelling. So they separate dwelling in there, but they're saying adequate separation distance are maintained for adjacent land uses. Well, there's all kinds of land uses. So what are those adequate distances? They didn't specify them. They never used the word setback in here once. But is it the 824 meters, the 4 times the height? Now, my land use is right up to the edge of my property. So is it 425 from the land use? They say, but that's only for dwellings. But what about the rest of the land use?
Sorry, I'm just going to the policy here.
Oh, it's not here. This is my own notes, yes.
Through your chair. So the way that the policy reads, the separation distance comes into play the sort of latter half of that piece of the policy. So shall not be required to have separation distances from a dwelling that exceeds the greater of the 4 times the wind turbine height or the distance to ensure that. So the first part of that policy statement is somewhat of a preamble, but
Well, not a preamble. It's separation distance are maintained from adjacent land uses. The land use is an actual thing. We list land uses in all of our municipal policies. So to me, that is saying that they don't list the adequate separation. So is it up to council to decide what it is? If it's from a farm or if it's from a recreational recreational environment or a park or a cemetery, or, you know, there's all kinds of land uses.
Through your chair, the way that I interpret it is it's the separation distance is measured to dwellings, and that's it.
I think it can be challenged. But the other thing I really am pleased to see as well is that they took woods camps out. So it's all dwellings now. The 824 is from all dwellings. Okay. And the reason for this is it speaks to, and you know, to sound, which is 40 decibels from a dwelling exterior. Well, some people's properties are 1,000 meters long and the dwelling's at the back and the windmill's right on the border of their other one. So 40 decibels right beside the windmill, it may not be, right? So a land use at the top of their property, it's not going to meet if they were to build a home up there, it's not going to meet the 40 decibels either. So I think what this is saying to me is it's basically property border. That's what it appears to be. Anyway, I got got lots more to talk about, but I'll save that for the PIM.
KJ?
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, I have 2 questions here and I'll try to be quick here. I'll start with the fun one first. So when it comes to like this broad change, looking at all municipalities within Nova Scotia, has either like NSFM or any other individuals within the province talked about conversations around revenue sharing, whether it's directly with the municipality connected with these windmills or potential windmills, or looking at direct impact for like revenue sharing with like relatively communities connected with it. Like I know we do development agreements and community benefit agreements around development, but I really think this is a really interesting opportunity that we could like look at using windmills as ways to one diversify funding for municipalities. So I'm trying to find like a silver lining in this, but like, has there been conversations around sharing, not cost sharing, revenue sharing? And then I'll ask my second question.
Through your chair. Not that I'm aware of. So this correspondence was actually received last Friday from the province. It came as a surprise to us. I'm assuming that's the case for all organizations. So I'm sure there's still conversations to be had.
Yeah, because I just quickly looked at the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities. I really don't see things there. So I'm encouraging our council members who are part of NCFM to really like kind of lead into that, where it's like, if the province is looking to meet their goals, which I fully understand, there needs to be conversations around compromising around creating funds that can help mediate a lot of the mistrust that's happening in the communities connected with this overreach when it comes to MGA. And then my last question is, what are other regional municipalities, especially rural ones, saying around this? Are you hearing things from your counterparts?
I have not heard anything from counterparts yet at this point.
Councillor Larry Pinch.
I was just going to respond with the information I have. So maybe when the mayor comes back, I do know that the mayor attended a meeting of all of the mayoral designates from the municipalities for NSFM a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So perhaps when he comes back, he might have some information. But I will let you know that the municipality of West Hants does not have a designate on the NSFM. We are included with the Valley portion, and there are no councillors from here.
Any other questions, comments, concerns on that item? Okay, there being no further there, our next is plan review, growth center policies discussion with the senior planner Dumpy.
Thank you, Chair. So similar to the last item, there's no presentation associated with this item tonight. I've put into the package a discussion report, mostly just information about our current growth centers and the development that's permitted and the variety of methods that development is permitted through in what we consider to be our current growth centers, that being in the West Hants documents, 3 Mile Plains, and Falmouth. And separately, staff are acknowledging Windsor and Hantsport as additional growth centers based on the regional approach to the plan review that we're taking. So really, I'm not planning to talk too much. What we're looking for with this item is some discussion around what we have available now as development methods, and what we should be considering for development methods and growth centers for the drafted plan review documents. So really, it's more of a discussion than a presentation tonight. So with that, that's really all I have to say on the item.
Mark?
Yep, through you, Chair, Planner Dumfrey. Upper Vaughan is not, and Vaughan and Mill Section and Well Settlement out to Leominster is not identified as a growth center, and we've never asked to be because that to us was always it would bring on things like apartment buildings and urbanization and that sort of thing. But we are a growth center. We're a hamlet basically, and we have grown. I mean, when I was younger, it was just Chester Road and some camps, and then the camps became cottages, and then the cottages became homes, and then these huge private developments went in. We have, I think, 6 now. And they have many homes and residents, and they continue to grow with homes and residents. But I'm curious how we can be recognized as a growth center, but protected under the Hamlet type designation with future developments and that sort of thing to preserve the the country and the chateau and the rural type living that's there now that everyone moves there for. We have people coming from Ontario, BC, Alberta, United States. Everyone is moving to our area because of what it offers, and it is at risk right now. But how do we protect that growth center? I guess is and identify not only the hamlet that it is, but future consideration for a hamlet, maybe a buffer zone or something like that is designated as future hamlet areas for development. So I just wanted to make a comment on that because I think that's getting lost in the growth in Hants County. It's growing quite fast out there.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Through you, Chair. Growth center is more of precise language in this case. We're not just referring to areas that have seen growth. In this case, growth center specifically refers to an overlay that will be included in the drafted planning documents, which allow for certain additional considerations. So higher medium density development is sort of one of the core features of a growth center as far as what we're looking at for drafting. So I guess in your example for Vaughan, if the intent is not to have that higher density of residential growth and development, then it would not likely be appropriate to designate it a growth center. That would introduce additional abilities for development that may not be wanted by the community if there is a concern with protection of the current building style.
If I may add to that, Chair, the current intent of the growth centers as well is to concentrate a lot of this residential development where there are services, like including, municipal infrastructure as well as grocery stores and those types of services, take or sort of directing growth that way out of places like Vaughan, where we don't necessarily want to see a ton of residential growth because there aren't those services in place. So that is, I guess, the benefit that we see of creating growth centers and policies around encouraging growth in those areas.
KJ?
Oh, Councillor.
Councillor Ivey.
Hey, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alex, for the overview and for getting us on the agenda, though I think there's other factors more than purely looking at the growth centers, the serviced areas of our region, based on what may exist for growth potential. Growth means different things to different people. And this goes back again as part of the plan review and getting, so what is the vision for West Hants? And vision for West Hants in both its rural and its, I'll call growth center, if I can be so bold as to just do two segments. We're a lot more than that. With agricultural farming, we are so many things. We are sitting in one of the most beautiful places that we could live. That it is more than that. So let's just take Windsor, for example. And I'd love to talk about 3 Mile Plains and Hantsport and West Hants as a whole, but I want to keep this brief. Windsor is noted in here as, it says, unless pre-zoned for higher density, all residential development or 3 units or above. I think 3 units is actually as a right automatically. So it's more than 3 units, just to be clear about that point. I could be wrong, and please tell me if I am, but I think it's anything more than 3 units is the criteria here. But going to more than 3 units here, if we were back 20 years ago, I don't think any of us would be questioning it the way we are today with the flooding that's taken place. And that overlays virtually every decision we could, should, or might be making here with growth and development and how we're going to do it and the timing of how we're going to do it. I'm not looking to speak against growth. I'm not looking to speak against development. I'm saying that if we look to have this conversation, we can't have it solely based on growth criteria. It's got to be that it includes the municipal climate action plan for Windsor, the municipal climate action plan for Hansport, the one that was done for Falmouth and or 3 Mile Plains, all of them back in the, or sorry, West Hants is what it was just categorized back then, back in the 2013, 2014 timeframe. And the recommendations that are in there are heavily weighted on the flooding aspects of what they knew were going to take place more than 10 years ago. They aren't heavy on greenhouse gas emissions, which is the reason that I've taken the stance and will in another couple of weeks as it relates to the Housing Accelerator Fund, that's a program with a primary sole goal of growth and development. When I raised the conversation here a month ago about that we weren't taking into account those municipal climate action plans, yes, there are components there that deal with greenhouse gas emissions, but not to the extent of the flooding, which is the primary big issue we have here with climate change. So I think this is a really important conversation for us to have. It could be a meeting all unto itself. It could be a great meeting to have public information and input and so forth as to what we would look at with this. And we have in some aspects with your plan review, it's in there, but it was a very, it was a narrow lens that was looked at in the way the questions were phrased in that document before your time, acting director. And then it subsequently has come up with the Housing Accelerator Plan. Similar question asked a different way, same thing, working towards that growth objective. So I just want to say that I think it's a great conversation for us to have, but we have to have it with an open landscape of how we look to have that conversation. So thank you for having it here to open this door up on it. I'd encourage us to find a way to broaden that conversation that we can get that right, so that it's not that we're responding to an application coming in where we're making strategy decisions for the municipality based on an application versus already having the groundwork laid for what and how we want to see the land developed within this area. So thank you.
Senator Dunphy, you were in response to Councillor Ivey, or should I go to KJ?
If it's all right, I'll just provide a little bit of clarification and then just a follow-up on Councillor Ivey's points in that piece. So just for clarification on the units, through you, Chair, sorry. The referral to 3 units is based on as of right development, not considering secondary suites. So it's difficult to account for secondary suites when you're talking about as of right development, as secondary suites are situational to each of the properties, site specific, depends on each property. So I may have lost some clarity by using that term of 3 units. However, in Windsor, I'll just briefly explain. There's a policy that allows consideration to rezone from the single unit residential to the 2 unit residential. There is no policy to consider rezoning to the multiple unit or the high density residential. So those styles of development of anything above, I'll say 3 units, referring to the R2 zone, so the 2 unit residential zone, is done through development agreement. So just to clarify my wording on that. And just referring back to the stormwater and the comments made about ensuring that we're discussing things with a wider lens rather than a very focused item. I appreciate the comments and they are definitely heard by staff. Stormwater has been identified as a major item to be concerned with in the plan review. So it is one of the major topic items that we have. And as such, tonight's discussion was supposed to look at one of the major topics that we've identified as staff throughout the plan review, and stormwater will be another one. So although we're approaching it in a piecemeal sort of this topic, then the next topic, then the next, staff will consider all of the conversation that we have about each of the items and bring that holistically into the plan review. So it's intended to be considered along with the other points as well. Just for simplicity, we had decided to bring up the conversation on growth centers to start. So we will be addressing some other concerns as well. And sorry for the long-winded answer. Thank you.
Just to say
Adrian?
thank you, Planner Dumpy. I appreciate that. Sorry, Chair, but just thank you for that perspective, Alex.
I have a few, and I'll just be mindful. I may condense. Oh yes, I have my soft radio voice. So when I see the growth areas, one thing that like I have a question on and trying to figure out if the plan department is also looking at it as well is okay. So we have these growth centers, great. Thumbs up. But where I'm looking at it as we're creating basically like economic like silos within our municipality, and we're not really trying to like from my standpoint, I'm curious. There is a missing conversation around how are we building like economic cohesion and like even just cohesion in general, where yes, we have multiple growth centers within our municipality, but what is the glue that allows individuals who are flowing into these growth areas that are surrounding them to be able to you know if you're in the Hansport area, how are you able to utilize things that are in 3 Miles Plains or vice versa, so that we're not necessarily seeing growth in one area, but we're seeing, sustainable growth, and really building our municipality on the life cycle of our residents. So just from that standpoint, like, are you folks looking at that regards, or is it simply like, this is where we're looking at and then building there and then moving to the next?
Great question. Through you, Chair. I guess I would just start with these growth centers that have been identified were identified in the past by council. So this was a previous council decision as part of the plan, I want to say of 2008, to designate these areas as growth centers separately. So that only applies to the West Hants plan. Separately, staff have been referring to Windsor and Hansport as growth areas as well, or apologies, growth centers as well, to approach the plan review with a regional look. So in that way, we are trying to consider paying attention to the specific needs of each of the growth centers, but also by creating some structure and framework to make it more simple in the ways that they're similar. So we're looking to identify how we can make the growth centers similar and easier to understand, while also maintaining the distinct development patterns of each growth center. So I think you let me know if that addresses your question.
Yeah, like a little bit, but like I think one thing I'm missing is understanding what's the municipality going to do to ensure that it's a like, yes, we're doing the regional plan and stuff like that, but how I've outlined it as like, what does the social infrastructure look like so that on the ground within these communities, people see the growth, but then they also see that their growth is connected to a larger regional growth, by seeing the interconnections and the interwovenness of development from another service center within the municipality.
Okay, yep. I think that's a complicated question to answer, in that there's definitely going to be more factors that are required in seeing the changes day to day than what we can provide with a plan review. This is one component of the change that, as a committee, as council, as staff members, that we're looking to vision into the next 20 years of development in the municipality. So this is just one component, and unfortunately, we can't really color outside of the lines when we have to deal with the plan review itself. So we do have requirements that we have to stick to. And as has been mentioned, we are essentially governed by the Municipal Government Act that states all the requirements for a plan review and all the options that a plan review can address. So overall, to answer your question, I think this is what we're looking at with the plan review is just one component to that. And I don't think we'll be able to address all of the concerns that we would like to as part of just the plan review.
If you don't mind, Chair, I'll just add to that. So within the structure of our draft MPS, the growth centers are their own section, and those sections more or less speak to kind of the scale of development that we are encouraging. Whereas the rest of the MPS, there are multiple sections speaking to, everything from stormwater to environmental concerns to different social pieces as well. So while the growth center sections might be somewhat brief and speak more to, housing density and scale, the other sections will still apply, municipality wide.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for the tabling of this conversation and not even having a presentation. I think this speaks to a broader issue, and I piggyback on what Councillor Ivy mentioned moments ago, talking about growth center. What do we define as growth? What I'm trying to say here in what Marcus was mentioning about Vaughan and Upper Vaughan is that I refer to a quote we use often in coaching, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and advanced communication when we refer to humans. We say map is not the territory. What does it mean? It means that on a map, you see a beautiful blue dot, that's a lake. When you go there on the territory, that lake has a complexity that a map, a law, a policy, will be never able to uphold. And that's what we are facing today in today's world, is complexity. No more complication. Complication, it's easy. Complexity is not. So from the standpoint of view, map is not the territory. We shall not repeat the mistake that our grandparents did when they came here and colonized. We should work with the people in that territory. So I think the next movement forward for making every aspect of this complex puzzle come together should begin from the grassroots instead of taking a monarchic approach is, I think this is right, and then it goes down. What about we start from the territory to build a map? What about if we ask the people of Vaughan what they think is right for their territory, to the people of Windsor, what is right, to the people of Brooklyn and the different cross-section and Curry-Smile. We are dealing with a county that is having a million different needs and a million different explanations for the word growth. And I advise our PAC and the whole council, the entire municipality, to consider this an experiment in not only creating policies and laws, but in creating principles, having foundational principles that allow us to grow in harmony with human development, nature, and happiness. I know that happiness is not mentioned anywhere in the Constitution of Canada. Meanwhile, it's tenet of the Republic of the United States, the pursuit of happiness. And we are a monarchy and we are not a republic. I'm fully aware of that. Nevertheless, it's never a bad time to begin thinking about foundational principles and deciding to make a plan for growth and development based on what the people needs and feel they need in order to be sustained. Because, we had storm for an entire time, for the entire lifetime of humanity. At the time, we were not calling that climate change. There was no climate change in Italy when a river destroyed my town, And so it's just management of storm water. we just need to manage storm water or we need to manage landslides, depending where you live. We will never have a landslide here, but in Italy we had landslides. So what, because in Italy we have another foundational proverb, which is vox populis, vox deis, which is Latin, which is the voice of the people is the voice of God. So what if we begin to hold more PIM, more meetings where the people speak the truth of their own land because they have lived there sometime for 5 generations? I am not one of those, clearly by my accent, but there are families here that have had 5 generations. So this is a fantastic opportunity. Thank you. I want to appreciate Manager Dunphy to throw the ball rolling here. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, if I may jump in, I think that's a fantastic comment, and definitely, although I'm not directly involved with the plan review project, I know Carrie and Alex has been working away with this project, and I do want to know, definitely public engagement is definitely a really, really foundational piece, and I will highlight one thing probably because this whole plan review has been conducted for several years already, and it's being delayed for some reasons. And we first approached this plan review by gathering a visionary survey, which was conducted last March, from March to April last year. And all of the results have been compiled into a What We Heard report. And that is when the citizens have the opportunity to share the first visioning for the future of municipality. And we definitely will have more from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie, we will have more opportunities for the public engagement down the road. So this is the discussion here tonight around the growth center, to my understanding, is just gather some feedbacks from the planning advisory committee. And so we can have the work done properly on the road. But again, public engagement is definitely something will come down the pipe, and there will be more public engagement opportunities. And in fact, I do want to note that we have a dedicated page for plan review, and where we have all the information to date, and we will also post other engagement opportunities on our website. So if you just Google West Hands Regional Municipality Plan Review, then the top result will lead you to the plan review page, and you can have all the information there, just for additional information. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. That was very helpful information.
Yeah, just to add to that, Will is correct. So we have done sort of visionary public engagement with the public at the onset of this project. And there's been a lot of background work over the last 5 years or so, post consolidation. So a lot of that work has been done, and even through the housing accelerator program, we did public engagement as well that we're taking into consideration for this project. And then moving forward, once we have drafts, so we're currently working on those drafts now and confirming a few things with the committee and getting some more input, but those will be brought back out to the public for them to view, to provide comments on, and essentially confirm that, you know, what we heard from them initially has been reflected, or if there's any feedback, that type of thing. So there's definitely a large public engagement component as part of this process.
KJ?
Yeah, and to that point, about the community engagement, I think would be, I really encourage staff to like utilize, you know, groups like PACAC in the co-creation process of it. Like I know that, you know, there's church and state, you know, and it's a very fine line of like, you know, stepping over folks' toes, but in the context of what we're looking at, you know, staff, municipality, council, like it's like kind of now or never in getting meaningful engagement. Like even just looking at like a lot of our things, we're saying like 9 and 8 people are showing up. Like there's clearly a missing link around how we're getting information out to the public, whether it's mistrust, whether it's personalities or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can only speak for myself, but like I'm willing to like sit down and like co-create different ways around engaging with our public around these topics that get you into the room to have meaningful conversations that are really anchored into what people are actually saying. Like I could even just look at my example. Like I have like people over my house. We can have 20 people over the house, and we're actively debating like what's happening in the municipality, and we're all over. We're like everyone's in all of the growth areas that I've been outlining. So I think the perk of I I've worked in Halifax development, and I think I say we, the royal we, as folks in Nova Scotia look at Halifax and say, we can develop too. And I say go for it. But one thing that we forget as we go to our development is at the core, we are like a small province that thrives on informal connections. That's how things get done in Nova Scotia. So I think to the point here is like I think we're complicating a lot of our community engagement. That is hindering people wanting to buy into the wonderful work that you folks are doing, I think having more conversations like this integrated into PACAC can help one, get the word out there that hey, folks and staff want engagement and stuff like that, and we can kind of help get you to that place so that you're into the conversations as well.
Through your chair, and just on that, we do plan on there's a number of PACAC meetings between now and when we will have a final draft. So we do plan on bringing little bits and pieces and, trying to focus on kind of the quote unquote hot topics like row centers, stormwater, view planes, things like that, and bringing that forward for, this informal discussion to get feedback before you have to look at the entire document, which will be, pretty significant. All the 3 documents will be. So, our hope is to try to engage with the committee over the next several months before that final document is shared.
Guido?
Sure. I just wanted to apologize preemptively. I didn't want to sound before when I share my point of view on principle and philosophy and humanism, that work on the people is not been done. Keep in mind that I am a 4 years old to West End, meaning that I never lived here before 4 years ago. But in any case, it's a fantastic opportunity to begin to work by principle instead of by policy. It's a different type of P. And I'm glad that there is all the involvement and what KJ has just said. And I completely chime into that. How can we do even further, even better? How can this be grassroots coming up, directing from the base instead of from the top? Thank you. Excellent.
Councillor Pinch?
I'm just wondering when we're done this item, if we could have a quick bathroom break.
I was just about to see if there was an appetite for a 5-minute, 10-minute stretch session, if
That would be lovely.
How does that have to happen?
Yeah, there's no formal request or motion to come out of this item. It's more staff plan to take the feedback that we received from this discussion and utilize it directly within the plan review in the drafting of those documents. So that's what we're looking to do with this conversation tonight. And there's no further expectation for a motion or anything like that.
Okay, very good. No,
I also add, Chair.
absolutely.
If there's anything, as you leave tonight, if there's any additional thoughts on the topic of growth centers, please feel free to bring it back to the next meeting for discussion or to add to, the additional topic that we'll bring forward as well.
Perfect. Shall we reconvene at 8:30 in 10 minutes?